Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this event to celebrate the opening of the British Museum's major exhibition, Hawaii, A Kingdom Crossing Oceans. My name is Julie Adams, and I'm the head of the Department of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas. Tonight, I'm joined by Alice Christophe, head of the Oceania team and lead curator on the exhibition. Alice will be talking us through the exhibition's narrative and sharing images of some of the extraordinary works you can see in the show. She'll also be sharing a little bit about the process of making the exhibition and the way the museum on this occasion has approached exhibition making as a joint endeavor with community partners in Hawaii. Alice describes this way of working as shared stewardship, a phrase that is being used more and more, but for those not familiar with it, really refers to the way that museums are acknowledging that people with ancestral connections to collections should be involved and consulted in all aspects of how they are cared for. This can refer to everything from how they are stored, to how they are displayed in an exhibition like the one we're going to talk about tonight, to the stories that are told in catalogues. This way of working, of sharing stewardship with community partners, is not just something that happened behind the scenes, but also something that Alice has made explicit in the exhibition itself. So you'll have the opportunity to engage with it both tonight and when you visit. At its heart, this exhibition tells a moving and powerful story. It marks 200 years since a series of events, including the visit of King Liholiho and Queen Kamamalu to Britain, seeking protection for their islands from the British monarchy. The exhibition reveals the tragic events that unfolded after Liholiho and Kamamalu arrived, but it also sheds light on the resilience of the Hawaiian people and the enduring relationship between the Hawaiian and British nations. Exhibitions take many minds and many hands to create, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of our team here at the museum who worked so hard to make this exhibition happen. You could say that Alice has been in training for making this exhibition for many years, having formerly worked in the ethnology department at the Bernice Pauahi Bishop Museum in Honolulu, an institution that has long-standing connections to our own and whom we consider to be a great friend. So I'm now going to hand you over to Alice, and I'll join you again at the end, where we'll have some time for questions from you, our audience. I hope that what you hear tonight will inspire you to come and see this wonderful, important, and timely exhibition. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for this wonderful introduction, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, for wherever you may be joining us today. I'm delighted to be with you and to be with you to share this introduction and a sneak peek of the exhibition, Hawaii, A Kingdom Crossing Oceans. The exhibition opened 2 weeks ago today, and it was really incredible to host so many people flying from Hawaii to shape this powerful moment with us. It's also been really special to witness the positive reception of the exhibition here in the UK and globally. And this show truly was a labor of love by so many here in London, in Hawaii, and beyond. So it's really moving to see it being experienced by so many of you now that it's open. And I must also say it's a great privilege to reflect on this and to share this collective journey here with you all today. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the people of the Pacific, our Pacific colleagues and friends who are joining us for this presentation from across the world, from Oceania, the Pacific region, and Hawaii, but also those who have made a home abroad, including here in the UK. Their knowledge, your care, and your generosity inspires us, guides us every day and always. I would also like to acknowledge those who in Oceania and beyond, including here in the UK at the British Museum, have cared for the stories and the ancestral works of this region over the years, those who have carved and held the space for this important place, Oceania, a continent of water and land that covers 1/3 of the globe, a continent that is not empty, but full and living, where water is not a barrier, but a freeway, a connector that links people and islands, and the people and islands that shape it. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge all of you for joining us today and for engaging with and supporting the work we do here at the British Museum. Although very few pieces from the Oceania collections are currently on permanent display, and this has now changed for at least just a few months through our wonderful Hawaiʻi exhibition, the work and research that takes place behind the scenes in the collection stores with Pacific communities has allowed us to rethink and reshape our collective understanding of the Oceania collections. This work is deep, it is meaningful, and it has also been made possible thanks to the support of so many of you. So we're very grateful. So today's talk is structured in two parts, and I hope you'll stay until the end because hopefully we will have some time for some questions if I don't ramble too much. And I'm first going to basically take you through a short story that has shaped the exhibition and its intentions. And please bear with me as I do so. We will get back to some of these details as we go through the second part of the talk as well. I will then take you through the exhibition and its story and show you some of the wonderful objects that are in the show. The exhibition is organized into 3 sections with an introduction and a conclusion, and ending with a beautiful poem. We will then, if we have time, take some questions from you. Also note that while this is a speedy introduction to the show, we have compiled detailed stories in the accompanying exhibition catalog as well. So please come visit the show if you can, and check out the book if you can as well. The story we're unraveling today starts here. Now, some of you might not recognize the building, but this is the entryway to the British Museum on Russell Street in the early 19th century, before the building transformed in the mid-19th century and took its current shape. On June 8th, 1824, 3 distinguished guests passed through this gateway, opening into a courtyard and leading to Montague House, the first home of the British Museum, on the site of the current building. These distinguished guests were Liholiho, Kamehameha II, King of Hawaii, Boki, Chief and Governor of the island of Oahu in the Hawaiian archipelago, and Kapihe, Admiral of the Hawaiian Royal Fleet. They were part of Hawaiian royal delegation of 12 who had made and who had traveled over 27,000 kilometers at sea from the Hawaiian Kingdom, a unified archipelago in the Northern Pacific, to Britain to seek alliance and protection from the British Crown. They left in November 1823 and arrived in May 1824 after over 5 months at sea and a stop via Brazil. Past the gateway of the British Museum on June 8, 1824, they made their way to the main building, Montague House, where they were seen there by Charles Habot, a museum trustee who later reported the visit in his diary. There was a large staircase with a ceiling decorated by French painter Charles de la Fosse. This monumental painting represented a scene depicting Phaeton petitioning Apollo, a story from Ovid's classical poem Metamorphosis that recounts the perilous and deadly journey eastwards of the sun god, who, like Liholiho himself, defied warnings at the time of departure. At the top of this staircase, upstairs, was Room 1, the first British Museum gallery to display collections from the Pacific region. And as this trustee reported, that this group went from room to room with much attention, there is no doubt that Liholiho, Boki, and Kapihe visited this room. In this room, the Hawaiian archipelago held a significant place. This illustration here shows the Hawaii display in the late 19th century, but there is evidence that it had changed very little over the years. And many of the objects drawn here went, in fact, on display in the galleries as early as 1803. Most of these objects, in quotes, had been collected and brought to England through the voyages of Captain James Cook, and particularly in his case, the third voyage, which was in Hawaiʻi in 1778, 1779, and Captain Vancouver in the late 1790s. As Liholiho, King of Hawaiʻi, walked into this room, he would have been faced with objects collected through episodes involving his great-uncle, Kalaniʻopuʻu, and his own father, Kamehameha I, the first king of unified Hawaii. In this moment, on June 8, 1824, these collections reaffirmed their status as ancestral treasures, works that hold a connection with members of the Hawaiian community, and in this case, Hawaiian royalty. Liholiho and his contingent were the first Pacific chiefs and monarchs known to have visited the museum. This visit marked an important moment in the history of this relationship between Hawaii and Britain, a relationship that endures today. It also opened new avenues for reconsidering the role of the British Museum in these early days of international diplomacy with the Pacific region. In the years that followed the 1824 visit, the Hawaiian collection grew, including through gifts brought by the royal delegation, but not only, and it became the largest collection of native Hawaiian objects outside of Hawaii. And I will repeat that sentence, the largest collection of native Hawaiian objects outside of Hawaii. This represents a significant responsibility for the museum today, and one that the exhibition reckons with. If Liholiho, Woki, and Kapihe were the first Hawaiian visitors to the British Museum, they were certainly not the last. Over the years, people have traveled from across the archipelago to London to research, reconnect, and honor the ancestral works that are here in London at the British Museum. These times and collections, away from the spotlights, have enabled us to reshape our collective understanding and experience of these works. This process has also nurtured the making of new works, as these collections have continued to be a living resource for the Hawaiian community today. It is these learnings, these unlearnings, these relearnings, these multiple ways of knowing and experiencing the collections and the scholarship of many here and there that have shaped the exhibition that just opened at the British Museum, Hawaii, a Kingdom Crossing Oceans. This exhibition shines light on the magnificent and powerful collections under the physical care of the British Museum, brought side by side with important loans from the Royal Collection here in the UK, the National Archives and the College of Arms in London, as well as contemporary works and British gifts to Hawaiian royals on loan from institutions in Hawaii, such as the Bernice Pauahi Bishop Museum that Julie was mentioning earlier, the Hawaii State Foundation for Culture and the Arts, and a private lender. The show centers the artistry and history of Hawaii, unraveled through the lens of the deep and complex relationship between Hawaii and Great Britain in the past, the present, and towards the future. It's an exhibition about movement or movements, back and forth, about allyship, about cultural exchange. It marks 200 years since the event surrounding the voyage of Liholiho and his royal delegation to the UK, a sequence that took place between 1823 and 1826. And a story that is told in the central section of the exhibition, like an anchor point to the narrative as a whole. As I mentioned before, this show was shaped by many here at the British Museum, including but not limited to the curatorial team with project curator Freya Crabtree and myself. But it was also co-stewarded or co-created with members of the Hawaiian community, with our primary exhibition stewards here on this beautiful photo, Umi Kai, Noel Kahanu, Lea Caldera, and Jonelle Pacaro, just to name a few. The contributions and voices of these co-stewards and many others are acknowledged throughout the space through written words, multimedia, and the integration of Olelo Hawaiʻi, Hawaiian language, again, throughout the show. These contributions have imbued every choice we collectively made to realize this show, and not just from a curatorial standpoint, but also in our conservation work, our design work, and our interpretation work. To be in this space is to experience not only stunning collections and powerful stories, it is also to understand their relevance for all of us in today's world. So the exhibition, as I mentioned earlier, is organized in 3 sections with an introduction and a conclusion. And as you can see on this diagram here, the south wall here of the gallery it evokes and invokes the ocean. And then this large back wall at the top here of the image represents the land and the people. As we make our way, and I'm now taking you through the show towards the exhibition, the first piece that you will see as you make your way up the staircase of the Great Court at the British Museum is a very large figure of the god Ku. This figure, or ki'i, of Ku is associated with, and this god is associated with warfare and governance. And here he stands on the mezzanine, again at the top of the staircase, marking a point of passage into the exhibition. The coming months are also associated with the god Ku in the Hawaiian calendar, which alternates between Ku and Lono. Lono, which is a different god, which brings harvest and abundance amongst other aspects. We believe that this figure may have been brought to London by Liholiho, the king that I was just mentioning earlier through this short story. And it is something that we rediscovered in the archives just a year ago, that connection between possibly this figure and this king. So it has been here in the UK for just over 200 years. On this figure, you can see a loincloth or malo made by the contemporary artist Verna Takashima. And you can see here that Ku was dressed with this beautiful loincloth just for this exhibition as we installed him ahead of opening, installed through the appropriate protocol. And again here, the loincloth is an evocation of the presence of the community and continued practice in this space. A last detail here that I would like to point out before we get into the gallery itself is that you can see here the image in the middle that Ku here is standing atop a pole. And if you look at the image right on the right, you see the same figure, without its loincloth, by the way, on an old plinth. Well, this is the same figure, in fact, but ahead of the exhibition opening, we worked closely with our community stewards to remove this old plinth that had been attached to him for many, many years, decades, in fact. And this removal of the plinth revealed below a pole. And so we are very happy to finally free Ku from this plinth and to be able to bring him into the space atop his pole. As you make your way into the exhibition space, you will hear a chant emanating from the corridor. And this chant is Eia Hawaiʻi. And it reads, Eia Hawaiʻi, he moku e kanaka. Here is Hawaii, an island, a person. He kanaka Hawaiʻi he kanaka Hawaiʻi, e kamana kahiki. Hawaii is a person is Hawaii, a child of Kahiki. Kahiki was the ancestral homeland of the Polynesian navigators that first reached Hawaii just over 1,000 years ago. And they're said to have chanted this chant as they reached the shores of Hawaii, citing the town, the shores of today's Hilo. And so this chant is pulling you into the space, and in the introduction that is dedicated to this idea of movement across oceans, ancestral movements, making the way into movements to the UK later on as well, and continued movements into the future. So the exhibition situates Hawaii really as a Pacific Island nation with long-standing ties and complex relationship with Britain, but also with connections across Moana Nui Akea, or the Pacific Ocean. We provide you here, and I had to show it today with a map to give you a sense of the scale of the Hawaiian archipelago, and often perhaps here, at least in the West, when we think about Hawaii, we think about those 8 main islands in the south, but in fact, this archipelago stretches much further with over 130 islands and islets stretching across the Northern Pacific. In the center of this introduction is this very powerful drum. This drum is named Akea Nali'i, was carved by the contemporary artist Kanae Kiave, and this artist, it's a contemporary drum. This artist recreates ancestral drums in the hope to be able to hear the voice of these ancestral instruments through this new piece. So in this space, the drum evokes the continuity of practice and living culture in Hawaii today. It brings in the voice of the community. But drums were also brought to Hawaii by relatives of those first Polynesian navigators who chanted that chant as they reached the shores of Hilo. So it has a connection as well to the chant. And as you make your way into the space, you see both the chants and the drum together, and you can hear this in the space. As you move progressively through the exhibition, you will see on this back wall that we were looking at on the first slide, this long curved wall, you will see light rising and a silhouette sort of peeking on the horizon. This is the silhouette of the volcano Mauna Kea on the island of Hawaii. And this is a moment of evocation of sunrise and Mauna Kea rising in this moment. Mauna Kea here is depicted as seen from Hilo Bay. Hilo, which again is this first place that those Polynesian navigators cite. Hilo is also the place of birth of Liholiho, whom we mentioned earlier. And Hilo is in fact also the place where the drum I was showing you earlier was carved. So if you see this light on some of our photos and this paper drop there, you will know that this is a representation of Mauna Kea. This takes us to the first section of the exhibition, which is dedicated to articulating the relationship between gods, chiefs, and people, and between them and the land. And so what we wanted to do in this first section is provide some context and grounding to be able to tell these stories of relationships, international relationships between the Hawaiian nation and the British nation later on, but grounded in an understanding of existing relationships in Hawaii that are constantly transforming as well. And the first, perhaps most striking part that you see as you walk into the space is this gathering of chiefs. So this space here that really was meant to evoke the idea of chiefs gathering into one space. And in this space, something that may catch your eye right now is the presence of featherwork. Absolutely incredible pieces of featherwork. I'm giving you a short focus on 2 here, and I could go on forever, but I see my timer running. 2 pieces here with a really beautiful helmet or mahiole, which would have been worn by chiefs, and it is made with mostly here 2 types of feathers, the EEV and the o'o on the crest, which is this long yellow feather that you see. The o'o is mostly an all-black bird with just a few yellow feathers, and so this would have taken probably quite a few o'o to make this crest. With so many long yellow feathers. And then on the left here, a very large feathered cloak or ahu'ula that is said to be associated with High Chief of Maui Kahekili and may have been presented to Captain Clerk who was a captain on Captain Cook's voyages. And he may have presented, Kahekili may have presented this cloak in November 1778 as Captain Clerk approached the shores of Maui. Now, when you see these really powerful pieces of featherwork, in this case, again, on the left, a cloak would have been worn by chiefs, would mark status as chief, could serve as physical protection, but also spiritual protection, connected the chiefs to communities of makers, feather workers, but also to their spiritual obligations. These garments were made of hundreds of thousands of small feathers from these birds that I was just mentioning, the EEV and the o'o in this case in particular. And so often people ask, but were the birds killed in this process? And we know that in some cases we can see some skins of some birds, so perhaps those birds were killed. But in most cases, birds were caught by the bird catchers or kiamanu. They would pluck a few feathers and then they would release the birds, allowing the feathers to grow back and in a nice way sustaining the resource and being able to come back for more and later harvests. So it's important to underline that the practice was sustainable and that these birds that are extinct and endangered have been affected by loss of natural habitat today and introduction of invasive species. In this space, we decided to present these garments as worn by chiefs to evoke the presence of chief, also reflect on the absence. And here we worked with our conservation and collections care team, with Nicole Rhodes, Hati Hapai, and Tui Hana as well, who is depicted here mounting one of these garments as worn. When you come and see the show, and I hope you'll be able to, it looks absolutely effortless in the space, but this little body form on the right gives you a sense of how many elements come into all these folds to be able to support those cloaks at every step in every corner. In the core of the exhibition is this display of large pieces of kapa or bark cloth. Here, the selection was put together by kapa practitioners in Hawaii based on Maui, Hina Nubel and Lisa Raymond, who picked really exquisite pieces of kapa that many of them are just over 200 years old and are extremely precious because they show diversity of techniques as well as patterning. Kapa was made by stripping the bast or inner bark of a plant, in this case paper mulberry, which could be soaked or beaten fresh and turned into large sheets and then decorated with either a liner or different stems. Kapa had multiple functions, could serve as garments, could also be used as dividers to define space, as wrappers. And so in this space, we present kapa in this way without a vitrine, so you're able to see them without glare. But also we use kapa as a membrane for the center core of the exhibition. And I just wanted to show you a close-up of a few because I'm slightly obsessed with kapa myself, and just giving you a sense of the incredible composition of these ancestral bark cloth, which I believe continue to be a source of inspiration for makers in Hawaii today. So we're excited for practitioners to keep coming and experience these in this space. Towards the end of that first section of this exhibition, where we look at multiple relationships between gods, chiefs, and people, and between them and the land, the narrative progressively turns to one particular chief, Kamehameha I. Kamehameha I, depicted here on the right on this portrait, was a chief from the island of Hawaii who rose to power in the late 18th century at a time when foreign powers were also increasingly entering Hawaiian lands and waters. And during this time, Kamehameha I began this process of unifying the Hawaiian archipelago into a kingdom. This is a process that he completed in 1810. And as he was about to complete this process, just a month before completing this process, he wrote a letter to King George III, so the King of the UK, a letter that we present here in the exhibition and is right here in the center of your screen. In this letter, he asks for support and protection from the British Crown against foreign powers. And he also adds a postscriptum, so you can see his signature here, which I believe, we believe this is his handwriting on the signature. And then in the postscriptum, he mentions that he's sending a gift. And this gift is the cloak that you see on the left, a large cloak, or ahu'ula. This cloak is the largest known ancestral Hawaiian cloak today. And in the exhibition, we're able to bring together this large cloak and the letter together for the first time. And the cloak has not been on display for over 100 years. Both of them are on loan from the Royal Collection, so still in the Royal Collections here in the UK. The cloak and the letter took 2 years to reach England, and so it was sent again in 1810, and by the time it arrived in 1812, George III, the supposed recipient, was no longer king, and his son, future George IV, was Prince Regent. And in this space, in the exhibition, we've brought together, again, the letter and the cloak, but we have this facing the coronation surcoat of George IV as a way to manifest this encounter between these monarchs in this space. And so this is an image for you of how this takes place in the space with these two monarchical bodies meeting. It was quite striking when these two came in the space during installation, to witness them, face to face, to also see the colors, echoing each other with the red velvet and the EEV feathers and the golden trims of the surcoat, with the golden yellow of the o'o mixed with mamo, which is another bird with a few yellow feathers. So a really powerful moment here in the exhibition. In the back, you can see a contemporary ki'i or figure by the artist Rocky Jensen that represents Kekua Okalani, who is an important figure in the moment of succession after the passing of Kamehameha I in 1819, and I will get to this in a moment. So from this point, we enter the second section of the exhibition, and I'm sorry, this is quite a speedy run through, but we have to get to the end. So the central section of the exhibition is dedicated to the story of the journey of King Liholiho, the son of Kamehameha I, who sent the letter and the cloak to the UK with a delegation of 12. So Kamehameha I passes away in 1819, and when he does, the care of government comes to Liholiho, to his son. There's a battle between him and his cousin that leads to Liholiho essentially becoming the mo'i, or king of Hawaii. A few years pass, and there's a couple of exchange of letters with the British Crown, and eventually in 1823, Liholiho's mother passes away. And this triggers his decision to embark on this long journey to the UK to meet with the king of this country and seek protection and alliance from the British Crown. So again, he departs from Honolulu in 1823 with a delegation of 11, including Queen Kamamalu, and reaches the UK in May 1824 after a stop by Brazil. So we have here just a few images of the members of this delegation. For some, unfortunately, there is no known images that we could locate, but this is a work in progress. Perhaps some will emerge. But again, delegation of 12 here, Liholiho plus 11. And this is the shape and the path of their journey as recorded by the whaling ship that they embark on to take this journey. So leaving from the Hawaiian Kingdom and making their way across the Pacific down to the Tierra del Fuego, up to Brazil, In Brazil, they will meet with the Emperor Dom Pedro and present a cloak to this emperor. They will also meet with the British consul to Brazil and present this cloak to the British consul. This was a really important finding for us during the research that led to this exhibition. This is a cloak that is at the British Museum, but we had lost the connection with this voyage, and we're able to determine that this cloak is the cloak that was presented by the Hawaiian royal delegation to the British consul in Brazil during this stop in 1824. Eventually, again in May 1824, Liholiho, Kamamalu and their delegation reach London and first Portsmouth, and are taken to London by carriage. Almost instantly, as they reach the UK, the press picks up the news of their arrival, and quickly there will be quite nasty comments made in the press and satirical drawings emerging, mockery commenting on the color of their skin, on their featherwork, and truly here in the exhibition we have brought together these satirical etchings, which are quite disturbing and are expressions of racism in 19th century Britain. But in parallel, their welcome is also dignified. And we will see these different tones, contrasting tones coexisting during their time in the UK with, again, this sort of noise coming out of the press, and then the reception of the Foreign Office and of the Crown. As they arrive in London, the Foreign Office hears of their mission. They were unannounced. And so they organize for them to have a host in London, somebody called Frederick Byng. They give them a hotel. They take care of their expenses. They vaccinate the delegation against smallpox, revealing legitimate concerns about their immunity to Western diseases. And this is a finding that came through the research that we did in the lead up to this exhibition. And they also have portraits drawn. Here, these two portraits made by British court artist John Hayter. And you can see that here they're wearing Western garments, and they're posing again, represented dignified, sending this strong signal of Hawaii being represented here as a sovereign and modern nation at the table with other nations as these monarchs have made their way to the UK. They await an audience with King George IV. Again, they have come here to seek alliance and protection from the crown. And they are going to be essentially, while waiting for this audience, which is scheduled for late June, they're going to be taken around London. They appear at the opera, they go to the theater, to Drury Lane, to hospitals, to breweries, and they come to the British Museum. As we started this story earlier today, sharing the story of them coming into this space and actually seeing many of the ancestral works that are on display in the exhibition that we have on now, both in the first and third section of the show. Unfortunately, as they're going through London, the whole delegation catches measles, and the King and Queen, aged 26 and 22 respectively, will pass away here in London, just a few streets away from the British Museum. So this is a really tragic moment that the exhibition marks and acknowledges. And in the center of the space, we were looking at these portraits earlier. Our designers have worked on a space that evokes the way they were laid in state in the hotel, again, just a few streets from the museum, with some candles lit in that room, some feathered cloaks also hung around the room, as per the newspaper articles that came out at the time and described this. But from this moment, we follow the next steps of this journey when the rest of the delegation does meet with George IV. They will meet with George IV without their king and queen, who obviously have passed in London, but they will succeed in their mission to secure support from the crown. And during this meeting, a certain number of gifts are exchanged. And in the exhibition, we're bringing together these gifts for the first time, both gifts of the Hawaiian royal delegation to the British monarch. These, again, pieces of feathered cloaks with featherwork playing a really important role in these diplomatic relationships. And of British gifts to the Royal Hawaiian delegation, we've brought this beautiful pocket watch here engraved with the arms of the UK, which is on loan from the Bernice Pauahi Bishop Museum in Honolulu. Again, allows us to see the gifts that were exchanged in that moment. During this audience between George IV and the Royal Hawaiian delegation, again, without Liholiho and Kamamalu, without these monarchs, George IV will commit to protect Hawaii from the evils from without, but not the evils from within, which is quite an interesting term that he uses in that space, and that's recorded by members of the delegations years later. He will also commit to returning the members of the delegation back to Hawaii and to Honolulu, and readies a ship from the British Navy to do so. This ship, the HMS Blonde, will return the members of the delegations back to Hawaii with aboard the DZ's monarchs, and it will reach Hawaii in 1825, bearing gifts from the British Crown, again, to Hawaiian royals. And we've brought in the space on loan from, again, the Bernice Pauahi Bishop Museum, these two diplomatic gifts that were brought on behalf of the British Crown to Hawaii in this occasion. And it includes a teapot, as you will see, with the name of Kahumanu, who is essentially Queen Regent at the time, and received this teapot from the delegation that is returning from London. This crew will attend to a certain number of obligations while in Hawaii. They will witness the ascension to the throne of Kauikeauli, or Kamehameha III, the brother of Liholiho, who becomes king at around age 11. And having done all these things, they will make their way back to the UK. So this is the British crew is now returning to the UK. So in the center of the exhibition, we tell the story of this, this return voyage back to the UK. And on their way back, they stop by this very important cultural site in the Bay of Honaunau. And as they enter this site, they said they're given permission to take figures from this site. This is something that is still discussed today. They take a certain number of ancestral manifestations, such as ki'i or figures, and take them back with them to the UK. This behavior really contrasts with the promises of protection and trust that have been developed while the delegation was in London and over the years. And so this is a decision and a moment in history that we continue to reckon with. And we've been working with people in Honaunau on Hawaii Island to decide whether we should display these particular figures that have made their way to the British Museum over the years, and how, and whether they should be accompanied by a certain number of elements. So this is how they're presented in the space, and I will encourage you to pause if you do come to the gallery, because there is a lovely note just on the left here of the image written by lineal descendants at Honaunau as an offering to these figures. As we exit the center section, we make our way to the third section of the exhibition, which is dedicated to the themes of resistance, coexistence, and resilience of Hawaii as a nation and as a people. In this moment, we pause first and gather in the space two very important documents that were created in London in 1843. So throughout the 19th century, Hawaiian leaders and monarchs, in fact, will continue to travel to the UK, and this connection will continue on. And we pause here in this year, 1843, when following the coup and temporary annexation of Hawaii by a rogue British captain, a group of envoys travel from the Hawaiian Kingdom to the UK to reaffirm Hawaii's independence. So in this space, we bring together, again, these two key documents. On the left here, the Anglo-Franco Proclamation of Independence of Hawaii, signed in London in November 1843. And then on the right, the Hawaiian Royal Coat of Arms, drafted again in the city in 1843. So we see that London in this moment, through the work of these envoys, becomes one epicenter for expressions of Hawaiian sovereignty. The Anglo-Franco Proclamation of Independence will recognize the independence of Hawaii for the West as a sovereign nation. And the coat of arms is quite an interesting document. At the back of that first page that you see, there is another sketch. And so on the first page that we were looking at, I'm going to go back quickly, you can see that there's a certain number of annotations just below the sketch. And then you see that the people holding the arms in the center are not wearing any garments or any cloak, just a loincloth. And at the back of this drawing, there is a further sketch, which is basically the corrected sketch after the envoys had commented very likely on the first sketch. And on this corrected sketch, we see that the figures that are now on each side of the arms are wearing a cloak. And earlier, I was just showing you a picture of a cloak that is in the first part of the exhibition with these same little circles here at the bottom. So we believe that this cloak, which is in the collections of the British Museum, which is said to be associated with High Chief of Maui, Kahekili, served as a model for the Royal Hawaiian Coat of Arms in 1843, which is one of, again, the small findings that took place as we were preparing for this exhibition. And you can see here the Royal Coat of Arms on the gates of Iolani Palace, or the Royal Palace in Honolulu. As we move forward into the third and last section of the exhibition, again, we approach the theme of first resistance. In this space, we reflect on the year 1893, when forces backed by the US military overthrew the Hawaiian Kingdom and the reigning queen, Liliuokalani. And we do so by presenting these pieces together. The first here, a contemporary piece on the left by the artist Kapoleni Landgraf. This is a portrait of Haunanike Trask, a scholar and activist, who is represented here with a text overlaid onto this portrait. And this text reads, "We're not American. He Hawaii ua mau a mau. We're Hawaiian forever and ever." This particular portrait is juxtaposed here with a letter penned by the last reigning queen of Hawaii, Queen Liliuokalani, and she's seeking in this letter support from the British Crown and British officials during the time of the overthrow. Now, some letters from Liliuokalani will be forwarded to Queen Victoria at the time, and Queen Victoria essentially decides not to intervene and place the fate of the kingdom in the hands of the Almighty, end of quote. However, the person to whom Liliuokalani writes in this letter, James Hay Waterhouse, is a monarchist and a supporter of the Queen of Hawaii, and he will try for many years to get the UK to intervene, and essentially not succeeding, he will return to the UK and retire early. In the exhibition, we move from this theme of resistance to the theme of coexistence. And this is expressed through a certain number of really powerful works, including this piece here by the artist Bernice Akamine, This piece is on loan from the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts. And if you look closely, and I'm sorry, the image is not the greatest, you can see that this is a bark cloth piece by a contemporary bark cloth, by Bernice Akamine, with the Hawaiian national flag. So if you look closely, he may perhaps at the bottom, if you're not familiar with the flag, the Hawaiian national flag repeated 4 times around a center square. Now, in the Hawaiian national flag here, you can see in the top left corner a Union Jack. And this indicates that in the Hawaiian national flag is, again, the Union Jack. This is a design that came from the time of Kamehameha I and shows that this relationship with the UK is inscribed really early on in the fabric of Hawaiian sovereignty. Now, in this particular flag, the artist has stripped the colors. There's no blue, there is no pure white, there's no red. And she returns here to the color of the plant, the paper mulberry, connecting sovereignty with the land. As we close the exhibition, and this is, I promise, the last 3 slides, as we close the exhibition, we turn to this idea of resilience. And we also turn back to this space, the British Museum, where we're hosting you from, where over the years, people have come to reconnect with ancestral works, to learn and relearn and reactivate ancestral knowledge. And in this case, I'm sharing works by contemporary artists. On the image on the right, Kumula'au Singh and Haunani Balino Singh, who have engaged and reconnected with a collection of woven works here, mahiole or helmets, but also papale or hats. Again, relearning from these ancestral practices to remake new works and train a new generation of ie or vine weavers. In this space, we also bring akua hulumanu, or feathered gods. These gods were amongst the first mea kupuna, or ancestral works, to leave Hawaii. We believe they were brought to the UK through the voyages of Cook, in a very particular moment during that voyage when they're brought out on a canoe and presented to Cook and their crew in Kealakekua Bay on the island of Hawaii. So they were amongst the very first ancestral works to make their way to this country. And they're still here. And over the decades, they've been seen by people, by cultural practitioners in the present, but also in the past by Hawaiian leaders and monarchs who've come to the UK, and some, as we now know, visited the British Museum. And so it was important for us to anchor the closing of this section of the exhibition in this connection between the past, but also looking towards the future. In the present, we are caring for these works in a way that tries to bridge physical care for these akua or gods with spiritual care and cultural care. And in this space, you see a weapon displayed just side by side with them, this little image right in the center, or leomano, a weapon made by the artist Umikai, who's also left a note next to this weapon to explain that he's presented this weapon to us to be kept with these akua hulumanu, or feathered gods, as a way of creating a form of protection for them and a connection with home here in London. Lastly, the exhibition closes on this horizon with a poem from the artist Brandy Nalani McDougall, written for her children. And really the idea here was to open on this idea of movement into the future, on hope, on what we share, and contemplate this path ahead. And so in this reading of this poem, the artist worked with students from Kamehameha schools who read the poem for us in this space. Here, Hala'i Pakaro. There's an excerpt of the poem on my last slide, but you can read this poem or this excerpt of the poem in the wonderful catalog that accompanies this exhibition. And I will stop here so we're able to take a few questions. Thank you so much. Mahalo nui.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you so much for taking us through the exhibition. Such a detailed and thorough and engaging way. Even though I've heard you talk many times about this, I learn something new every time. So that's great for me, and also I'm sure for our audience. And although it's your voice that we're hearing tonight, I think you did a really brilliant job of giving us that sense of how peopled this exhibition is and how we're hearing from many voices as we go through the space. We have had a lot of questions, and thanks to
Wonderful.
helping me shape them into some kind of groups. So we don't have lots of time, but I'll try and at least pick out a few that I think group together some of the issues that have been raised. There's a couple of questions around the figure of Ku, the large figure that we saw at the very beginning who greets you as you enter the exhibition. Someone asking a very straightforward question that even I can answer, which is his malo, his loincloth, made of kapa, bark cloth? And the answer is yes, it is.
Yes, indeed.
And then a follow-up question to ask, and this might tie into some issues that we could talk about shared stewardship, is people are asking, why is Ku wearing this malo now when we see in the older photographs that he was not wearing such a malo? So maybe could you answer that for us?
Absolutely, I will try. So this malo was made for Ku, I believe, in 2018. Please, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong. So the photo you see, the small photo that you could see on that slide represented Ku on display at the Museum of Mankind, which is well before that time. What's interesting is that over the years and starting in 2010, I believe, a certain number of cloth of malo of garments were made for Ku as a way of honoring him in this space as an akua or god, and make sure that he's appropriately dressed and that appropriate protocols are undertaken to present him in this space. So I'm glad you picked this up, because I think having now seen him dressed in this space and also standing atop his pole, and this is something we were discussing with our co-stewards, he looks absolutely magnificent in this ball, but he also would feel completely naked if he did not have that loincloth now to us. He very much, his image as on display comes with that. I think it was really important to respect that for this exhibition.
Great, thank you. We have quite a few questions around featherwork, so I've got them into two little groups. The first one, a couple of people asked if the production of featherwork in Hawaii is indicative of some connection to South America with the known traditions of featherwork in that place. So I think you can probably quite concisely answer that.
I would say the short answer on this one is probably no, not in that way. However, I think we should underline that obviously Pacific people traveled across the ocean and 100% reached the coast of South America. In fact, they brought the sweet potato from South America, a certain number of gourds. So there are connections there with the coast of South America. When it comes to featherwork itself, I would say this is specifically Hawaiian practice. It also echoes some of the featherwork that we see in other parts of the Pacific, including in, for instance, French Polynesia.
Thank you. And so the kind of slightly more perhaps nuanced question is, a lot of people commenting on how beautiful the colors are in the featherwork, but observing that there's a limited range. So we see those very distinct yellows and reds, and then occasionally the blacks. And people asking if that's due to the availability of resources around those colors, or if there are some symbolic or significance, cultural significance to those three colors.
It's a really good question. That also is a tough one. I think we'd have to ask feather workers about this. It's people in the present that still make featherwork and innovate with all sorts of colors, sometimes with dyed feathers, also bringing other colors into the making of featherwork. But in this case, we often think about red as a color that's associated with relationship and sacredness. So red is a color of choice across the Pacific, and in particular in Hawaii. And it is said that because of the rarity of yellow coming from birds that are all black, again, with just a few yellow feathers Yellow feathers were probably more precious because more rare, and so connected to the prestige or authority of specific chiefs and their ability to gather these resources in times of abundance. So we do see in ancestral featherwork other types of colors, and in fact, working in collections with a certain number of colleagues from Hawaii, we've paid particular attention over the last years the integration of green, which stay tuned. I'm sure we will share more about that in the future.
We have lots of questions about kapa making, about bark cloth making, but I'm going to pause those and tell people to come and see the exhibition and
come see the show.
Come see the show, read the catalogue, and then I'm sorry we won't have time to answer them. But the final question is something that it really struck me because it never occurred to me, and I don't know if you'll have an answer. But somebody asked if there's any record of George IV appearing wearing a Hawaiian cloak or any of the cloaks that you mentioned that might have been gifted to him, which I'd never thought of, and I really want to know the answer.
That's such a fab question. Thank you so much, whoever asked that question. There's a story there because the very large cloak that was sent by Kamehameha I, supposedly to his father and received by him, reached the UK in 1812. And it's absolutely huge, right? Again, the largest known ancestral cloak today. But George IV was said to be quite a short monarch. And so we believe that if he ever wore this cloak, and we don't have any proof that he did or any image, but if he ever wore this cloak, it would have been slightly oversized for him. So thank you for that question.
How delicately put. Okay, thank you everybody. That's all we've got time for, unfortunately. Once again, thank you so much to Alice for taking us through the show, and a reminder to all of you that you've got until May the 25th to come to the British Museum and see it for yourselves. We look forward to welcoming you. In the meantime, thank you very much. And
don't miss it.
Good night from the British Museum here in London.
Thank you.